Hi, I'm Ross Mayfield, investment strategist at Baird, and we are back for another weekly update with our friends at Strategas. Today, we are lucky enough to be joined by Managing Director and Washington Research Analyst Jeannette Lowe to talk all things politics and policy. Jeannette, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Ross. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. We're talking here mid-September of a presidential election year, so obviously a lot going on. I want to start with kind of a high-level theme that you and your team have been talking about this year, which is the idea of the election as a referendum on the speed of deglobalization. And I wondered if you could kind of break that down for us and highlight a few key items or relationships that are worth watching going forward.
Absolutely. So this is one of the biggest differences that we see in the policy positions of the two candidates. So former President Trump and Vice President Harris would definitely have divergent views on trade policy, particularly with regard to China, but then also with other countries like Mexico and Europe. And so what we're seeing that's really interesting this time around is that the election is actually playing and moving other countries' stock markets and other countries' currencies on this trade idea of the different policies that you would see. So while we do think that both candidates would be quite hawkish with regard to China, continue to focus on this deglobalization theme of reducing reliance on goods from China, reducing our dependencies on any supply chains that come from China, really trying to reshore or also try to build out supply chains with our allies and partners, we think that that's going to continue regardless of who is president. However, Harris, we think, will be much more targeted in her use of tariffs, and she would not necessarily go after countries like Mexico or Europe to try to get concessions through the use of trade policy. On the other hand, Trump is going to be quite aggressive with his use of tariff policy, similar to what we saw during his first term. He has threatened to use tariffs as high as 60%, even 100% on China, which we think would be really key to this theme, that it would accelerate the movement of supply chains out of China, with a key beneficiary being India. But he also may try to employ some of these tariffs, or at least tariff threats, on countries like Mexico to focus on the border, on Europe to focus on defense spending and things of that nature. So this really is mostly about China and the speed of deglobalization there, but it also plays into some of these other countries as well. And you're seeing a lot of those impacts play into this election as we're seeing movements in which party might win the election.
Right. And obviously, even more front and center because a lot of the trade and tariff policy can be undertaken kind of outside of Congress. At least that's what we've seen in the past. And so who wins the presidency is especially important for where we go on that front. The other big thing that, is a big theme for this election, or something that we're certainly hearing a lot about in our world, is tax policy, the potential to extend the tax cuts from 2017, as well as some other items around the corporate rate and individual rates. What are you seeing on the tax front? And is there anything we should know or is important before the election actually plays out?
So it's exactly right. So in 2025, we have a huge tax policy debate coming up. This is because all of the individual tax provisions that were enacted in 2017, as you mentioned, as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, are going to expire, as well as some other spending provisions, and they are all going to expire at the end of calendar year 2025. So Congress will pass a tax bill next year because neither party wants the middle class tax cuts on those making less than $400,000 a year to expire. So there will be action taken. The issue is really going to be, what is the outcome of the November elections for both the presidential level and the congressional level? And then what does the US fiscal situation look like? So we are obviously in a much more difficult US fiscal situation, given the fact that we have had higher interest rates that has led to a higher cost for the US to service its debt. And the higher US net interest costs are starting to eat away at other budget priorities. And so that means that next year, we have both parties thinking about, how do you raise revenue to pay for any tax cut extensions, whether that means that we limit those length of those tax cuts, whether we do some tax increases, maybe modest ones. Some proposals are a little bit larger, but all of that is going to depend on what does the fiscal situation look like, but also what is the outcome of the election. So not only does the presidency matter, with Harris proposing different tax policies than Trump would, but also what happens in Congress. And I would say right now, it does look like we are going to have split government control in Congress, with most likely the Republicans taking over the Senate, and it being quite likely that the Democrats take over the House. But if you have a split government scenario, that does mean that it's going to limit what can actually get done, because you're going to need compromise. And regardless of who controls either chamber of Congress, the margins are going to be really small as well. So again, that forebodes for more congressional compromise than in the usual case. But we really do need to see what is the outcome of the election to kind of have a better feel for what some of the tax extensions will be, how long they'll be extended for, what kind of tax increases will be paired with them. But then we also do need to know what's going to be happening with the US fiscal situation, because you do have members of Congress concerned that now deficits really do matter. They haven't always mattered in the past, it seems, but because of the net interest cost and the fact that it's impeding other budget priorities, that's going to refocus Congress's attention and make it much more likely that any tax cut extensions do need to be paid for in some way. But we do have to kind of wait until the election to have a little bit more clarity on what that tax debate is going to look like.
Absolutely. Well, that is why we are glad to have you all on the team. We will be sure to get back with you around the election and after the election to get updated information on the results and what to do in 2025. So Jeannette, thank you so much for the time as always today, and look forward to talking again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.